sending an email downstream to their employees asking for some special favor, special project, and usually trying to extract some form of confidential information or monies out of the folks who are just trying to do their jobs here. So here's a few examples of these phishing attacks that we typically see. As you can see here, it's an email coming from somebody who's trying to impersonate an executive of the company. Here are some samples that we got from some of our customers here, and all the folks here, Lori, Lane, Steve, Brad, these guys are all CEOs of their respective companies. And when you look at the messages themselves, very simple. Hey, can you do something for me? I need you to get some iTunes cards, or I need you to make a payment. So really, when we look at those, there's not much that there is to detect besides, trying to identify the sender's information. The body of the message itself is pretty simple. Here, often what we find is that the smart attackers, what they'll do is that they'll compromise a legitimate account, either partner of yours, and they will start phishing folks at other companies. And what that does effectively is bypass all the email authentication schemes that are there to try to protect those senders and those recipients. So unfortunately here, when it's coming out of its trusted source, right, we really have to rely on the ability of the various engines here to be able to detect those attacks. Like I said here, those attackers always try to extract some form of financial, or when it's tax season, W-2s, in order to get what they want here. So let's take a look at, like I said, at those emails. Just by themselves, when they render in your email client, they look pretty benign. Unless you kind of deep dive in the message themselves, it's a little hard to identify, is this really, my CEO sending me an email, right? So what the attackers really hope is that you are opening those emails through your phone, right? So for example, let's take a look at these 5 emails open on an iPhone, and they look pretty normal, right? So if I'm not really paying attention here, right, I could see that email coming in and says, hey, I need you to do something really important, right? I open the email, and again, the iPhone does a good job at making things easy, but it hides a lot of the information. So, unless I tap on the contact name, I won't be able to see that it's really that person, or it's somebody else trying to impersonate them. Same thing for your email client. Here is, we're using Apple, the Mail app on the Mac, and very similar to here, it's not showing me who the sender is unless I hover on top of that little icon here to show me what email address is sitting behind that, right? So often, you'll get these emails being sent to the employee, on a Friday or at the end of the day where, there's something, these guys are out of the door or they have to go pick up their kids, and, it's an urgent request. So, as an employee, of course, you want to make sure that, you do your job and you do, what your bosses need you to do. And you'll often, just kind of take care of the situation without really going through your diligence and, and making sure that those emails are entirely legitimate here. So let's take a look as to, why these attacks work, right? So, and how they work. So from, the perspective of the attackers, right? So they know that, most people don't really question their bosses or their executives when they do something. We found a fair amount of attacks, especially around Christmas, where it was a lot of like, hey, I want to surprise, your coworkers. I want to go out. I want you to get some, let's say Walmart or Amazon gift cards. Can you do that? And, just scratch off the back and send them over to me, right? So, and often, people understand that, especially around the holidays, that, they want to help. So, they'll fulfill the request, not knowing that, they're communicating with a bad actor here. What makes these attacks also very difficult to detect is that there is nothing really actionable in those messages. There's no links, there's no documents, there's no files to open. It's really a social engineering attack here to try to convince you to go take action based on what's being asked of you from this imposter executive. So why does it work, right? Like I said, most folks here don't really question their bosses, right? So if you're asked to do something, typically most folks will comply and do the requested task. As we've seen on the previous slide here, when we look at how these messages are rendered through devices or even through standard email clients, right, a lot of information gets lost or just not simply presented, which makes you even more susceptible to being phished here. And finally, A lot of defenses are put there in regards to looking at the sending infrastructure to make sure that it's really that sender. And again, if the attacker does compromise a legitimate account or a partner of yours, then the good chances those emails will be trusted. Without looking at the content of the message itself, it makes it very difficult to identify those phishing campaigns. So how would everyone block this, right? So again, our technology goes around in terms of identifying threats, campaigns, bad actors, bad infrastructure across the internet. We do that through our active sensor technology, as well as our active web crawler that can scan the whole internet and determine the different campaigns that are being set up. But also, when it comes down to the actual email detections, there's a fair amount of advanced detections that we've implemented as part of our email service. So we go, as I mentioned, we go beyond email authentication. We look at the content of the email, the context of the email. We go beyond simply looking at the mismatch of the display name and the email address. So we do advanced detections, things like natural language processing, where we take a look at the message as a whole to understand what is going on there. We have a pretty extensive AI model that allows us to make those accurate detections, and we train those models with an extensive corpus of messages here. And finally, we take a multivariate detection approach to all these messages to make sure that we can detect these very accurately. And finally here, we do take account some of the sender reputation that comes with the message here. And all these factors are taken in consideration in order to determine the phishiness of the message. So, we continue our mission here at Area 1 to make sure that we can protect our customers from phishing campaigns. And of course, we're always trying to stay ahead of the attackers here. And this is really the mission of the company. So if you do have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach us. If you're listening to us on YouTube, please feel free to leave a comment down below, and we'll be happy to get back to you. Thank you, and have a great day.